So, I've been reading a book just from like yesterday about called Stolen Focus. Why You Can't Pay Attention by Johan Hari. I'm still reading. I'm almost finished with this book, the six Secrets of Intelligence. I haven't made an episode about the three last secrets because I I just wanna be sure I understand them because they're not as easy as a concept to get as the three other ones, right? The three other ones are basically like logic and stuff, but the three last ones are not as easy to grasp. All right. So, the first chapter of this book, I have a, I have my, like, I'm making notes about this book, so I can easily remember every chapter. And I'm now about a page or so, a little more of a page in from only one of the 12, or there's also conclusion and stuff of the chapters, right? So it's gonna be a very big note document. But the first one is the increase. So it's basically the chapters are so like this. They're basically like all like causes of distraction. So the first one is cause one, right? The increase in speed, switching, and filtering. That's the first cause of a loss of distraction. So I'm just gonna go over every single one of them, and then maybe like, and then I'm gonna give a way to work on those. So the first one is speed. Speed is basically it basically says that the more information in a faster period of time, the less you can understand it. So I wrote this all down on the notes, right? Take speed reading, for example. I wrote this down, right? The faster you can read, the less of the information you will understand. So, of course, there's a balance, but don't go reading a book in 5 years, right? But also, do not read a book you want to implement in your life, like this one. Like, just read a chapter a day or so, or even like read a chapter every 2 days to fully understand that chapter, because there are three pretty big ideas that you can work on in that one chapter of like 20-30 pages. Like, I mean, else you have like already everything in 10 days, 12 causes with probably even more in those causes. Like, that's just way too much in 10 days. But that's the speed I am on. Imagine the speed other people are on whilst watching highly edited. I'm not saying like animations. Yeah, that's edited. That's also a type of information. But even more distracting, even more information is like flickering pixels or like flickering animations, because that's a lot, like a lot of information bombarded in a very, very short period of time. And animations are information too, right? Like pixels on the screen, right? The the like basically everything you experience really is a type of information. Take meditation, for example. Meditation allows you to constantly grasp the information and understand it and experience it really fully, right? because else you will see all of that information at such a high speed that's just too much. Therefore, meditation and stuff like yoga and stuff help. Alright? That helps. So, yeah, that's speed. Then switching. Even in switching, there are like 4 things that it does. So switching basically is when you switch, therefore the keyword, between stuff. Switching between subjects whilst discussing. Switching between checking your phone whilst working. Stuff like stuff like that, right? Switching between things. So, when you switch between subjects, thoughts, stuff like that, your brain needs to remember what you were thinking about. It needs to remember what you felt about it. It needs to remember why you were thinking about it in the first place. It needs to remember, it basically needs to grasp a save file from like a video game or like a database, right? It needs to grasp the save file and load that entire save file, or like reload it again in the brain. Every time you switch. And that costs processing power. So you will ultimately you will lose time. But the amount of time you would lose that way is basically not comparable to the amount of time it would take you to get the same level of focus back. So the focus you had before you had switched. It would take you minutes, not even, probably even tens of minutes, like 10, 20 minutes, stuff like that, to get the same level of focus back. Of course, granted that you already had a little bit of focus. But therefore, multitasking isn't really a faster way to get stuff done, so I would kind of throw multitasking out of the window. Sorry for my pronunciation. But the second one is, you will ultimately make more mistakes. Because every time your brain grasps the save file out of the database, puts it up in your memory or in your conscious experience, they will probably save or load something a little bit, like slightly wrong every couple of times. Imagine how much an average person is distracted or switches every single day. Imagine that. Imagine how many mistakes they will make every day. Like, if I'm gentle, I would say 2. But if I'm honest, I would say a lot more actually. But let's say 2. Let's say 2 for one work day. 2 slight mistakes if I'm gentle, right? Maybe that they're even one bigger. So let's say 2. In a week, your work week is 5 days. 10 mistakes, 10 slight mistakes every work week. Then imagine an entire year. That's about 520 slight mistakes. Of course, minus like holidays and stuff, so maybe like 480 or so, like 480 mistakes slight mistakes in an entire year. Even if there's the 1% chance you will make a bigger mistake, you will make 4, maybe even 5 big mistakes. If there is only even 1% every mistake you make that it's a bigger one, you'll make 4 or 5 bigger mistakes every year, which is quite big if you don't work on it, right? Then you'll also be less creative, but yeah, because when you think about it, when you're not distracted, you will be thinking about everything you absorb, like the information. You will be pinpointing like realizing, oh yeah, so because I read that chapter and I watched a video, I now understand how to fix this. You'll be drawing links, and you will realize new links, and you will thought of as impossible, and now you whoa, wow, and so simply said, you're being creative. But when you're distracted on a day-to-day basis, you will have less chance to really think creatively. And then the last one is like quite short. You also remember less of what you do. There's a little bit less evidence of that, but because when you're spending time fastly switching, you'll have less time to create memories and or learn new things. Therefore, just remembering less of what you exactly did that hour. That the switching summed up by Johan Hari basically is, if you spend your time switching a lot, then the evidence suggests that you'll be slower, you'll make more mistakes, you'll be less creative, and you'll remember less of what you do. Basically summed up in a sentence. The last one is filtering. Imagine that you're reading a book on a train, on a noisy train actually, like with sounds and just a distracting environment. Normally, your brain would filter a big part of the distractions, but nowadays it's kind of overworked with all the distractions, all of them that bombard your brain, or bombard the filter. To say differently, the distractions are now, instead of hoping to not get caught by the filter, by like the identity guard, and the distractions hope to not fall over the feet of the sleep-deprived filter that's sitting on the floor, not really able to fall asleep because of all the distractions that are floating like that by him, but also not really able to stop any of them. Imagine your filter kind of as a guard to your brain, right? It kind of guards your focus. It guards what can access your brain. It guards what can influence it. But if it's overworked, you will be easily distracted. So now I'm gonna suggest stuff. So in this last part, like about like a couple of minutes, like 2 or so, I'm gonna suggest stuff to do to increase stuff to do for every one of those keywords. So for speed, I would suggest you take a lot of the information you take in. I would suggest you take that in very deeply. So for example, like I'm doing right now, I read one chapter of this book. I made like more than a page full of notes about that one chapter, and now I'm even making an episode or a video, what you will call it, about that book, about that chapter, and I'm even searching for things to help me with it. Very slowly taking in the information, very effective. Instead of just mindlessly watching YouTube episodes and just, of course, it's a nice way to start, but you're kind of losing your focus that way. Now, switching. Switching is basically getting distracted, right? Like switching basically is that you're not in the flow anymore. You get distracted by a call or some stuff. You need to limit the distractions. Really. You need to stop reading 10 pages of a book and being all like, oh, chess. Right, just do something for an hour and then switch, right? Not that difficult, but it's a habit, right? It's still quite difficult. Then filtering, very quick. Yeah, just don't go watching very animated YouTube episodes or stuff like that. Just don't do that. Let your filter or your guard have a bit of rest. That was it. Thank you for watching, right? Again, it's still in focus by Johan Hari. and I will see you next time, guys.